So today's session is going to be about sort of learning a little bit about Claude Code and understanding how you can build applications using Claude Code. What I mean by application, I mean software applications. And then we are also going to look at the concept of what is known as spec-driven development, what that means, why that is important, how that is actually useful. So we're going to look at all of that. Now, a little bit about ourselves. We are Curious. My co-host Avneet and I, we are going to be our primary hosts for today. This is a session that we conduct on a weekly basis where we look at interesting AI-related concepts. We pick up different concepts that people would really have said that they are interested in learning, new things that are coming up. And then we sort of create this session where I sort of walk through the in a first principles manner, the basics of those concepts, and then we'll also have time for you to ask us questions. We do try to make these sessions very low key. The idea for us is to this not to turn into like a full lecture, but more like a space where we can actually talk about things, answer questions, clarify doubts. So hopefully it will become sort of an interactive session. Um, Now, before we actually go into the content, I do want to maybe ask you folks to quickly introduce yourself. You can send us an introduction on Zoom chat. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what do you do, and what is the one thing that you would want to learn from today. So if people want to take a minute, just quickly write your introductions on Zoom chat. My name is Madhav. Like I said, I'm your primary host, and we also have Avneet, who's going to be the co-host for today. So I'm going to give people maybe a minute to uh, quickly introduce themselves. Hey, Avneet. Hey, Dan. Lovely to have you. I'm maybe going to give a minute more. Hey, Emily. Hey, Shantanu. Hey, Kevin. Oh, have your own startup. Nice. AI developer of Venture Studio. Super cool. Roberto. Nice. A lot of cool introductions. Hey, Roberto. Hey, Vashant. Hey, Teresa. Okay, nice. Yeah, I'm a AI enthusiast from Chicago. Nice. Uh, okay, nice. Awesome, folks. This seems like a very, very cool group. Again, folks, keep going with your introductions. Thank you so much for joining today. But essentially, again, in this session, we are going to look at Claude Code and how to use spec-driven development with that. But amazing, folks. Thanks for your introductions. And you can use this chat for any questions at any time, and I'll start to also answer them. Okay, awesome. Cool. Now, I do want to emphasize on one thing before we actually start going into the content. We do want to sort of create this to be a safe space to learn. So it's very important for us to stay respectful, being kind, and assuming good faith in the conversations. It's very good to sort of like we want to create like a healthy learning environment, and so the idea for this session is to just be respectful and to just create a very very safe space. If the people have any questions, feel free to ask on Zoom chat. But if any disrespect, anything harsh, then we are going to like be removing them from the session because it's important for us for everybody to have a safe learning environment. Okay, awesome. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about who this session is essentially for. Thanks, James, for your question. Will the recording be made available? Yes, we are going to be uploading the recording and sharing that with this group. Okay, so this session essentially is for three groups of people mostly. It's people who are in the product side, people who are building a software product, who are interested in building something. So we're going to talk a little bit about Cloud Code and spec-driven development from that perspective. It's also for software developers. Oftentimes, I have found that software developers have already like learned how Cloud Code works, so they already understand that. But hopefully, this will also give you some perspectives on that. And then the third one, this is for hobbies, people who want to like get into sort of using Cloud Code, building software just for your own interest. A lot of those people hopefully will also find value in this session. Now, the one thing I do say before I actually start is it's important for people to share their perspectives if they have already tried something. We are all here to learn from each other. So if you are somebody who has tried something that you have seen work, please feel free to share. Everybody will learn from everyone else. Okay, awesome. So let's dive into like the specifics of what we are going to be doing. We are going to be covering, this session is going to be divided into two parts. In the first part, we are going to be looking at the fundamentals of Claude Code, what it is, what it does. And in the second part, we are going to look at a very specific philosophy of spec-driven development, which sort of helps you to guide your Claude Code system better for building software. So this session is broadly going to be divided into two parts. I am going to be taking breaks in between to let you folks ask questions or anything that's unclear. And you guys can always ask questions on Zoom chat anytime. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Claude Code fundamentals. I do intend to spend a lot of time on this just to sort of like give you guys like a little bit of a demo, show you how things look, and then we are going to go into deeper concepts. Okay, so before I go into like what Claude Code even does, I think it's important to like sort of touch base or understand what code is, because unless you are from a software engineering background, but it's important like that it's important to like sort of give a brief of what actually code is. So essentially a code, but we oftentimes say, is essentially a set of instructions for a computer. So a code can tell a computer to run an animation, play a movie. Zoom itself is code that someone has written. So code is just a set of instructions that are given to a computer. Oftentimes that code is written in files, and then those files are one that your computer executes. So your computer can be a laptop, it might be a desktop, it might be a big system. So software is a set of instructions. Those instructions are written in files, and a program essentially or a software is made up of all those instructions sort of combined together. So let's say if somebody is writing a program for Zoom, right? So Zoom code would have been written in files, and then those files are then executed by your computer, and that's what allows the current interface that we are seeing. So essentially, that's what code is. So sometimes code in, for example, in Python can look like this. It's like badly written code, but it can sort of look like this. There are many different ways of writing the code. So you might want to write it in Python, you might want to write it in Java. Those are all different coding languages that people use for writing a software. Now, before I sort of move on, I do want to sort of talk about why understanding this aspect is important in the perspective of Claude Code. So I'm going to go on my Excalibur. Let's go here. Okay. Now, the reason why that's important is, like we discussed, a software, let's just write it here. A software is made up of a lot of code that is sort of written. Now, oftentimes, till before our latest large language models came into the picture, let me just call it code files. All that code was mostly written by software developers as humans, as people who understood how to write those code, like somebody who knew Python programming, somebody who knew C programming. They were able to write that code. They were the ones who would be the one who were actually doing that work. Now, with the advent and with the generation of these large language models, such as ChatGPT, like the GPT model, or Claude, or any of those various models, one of the things that has happened is that we have now this AI system that can write code. So essentially, because code is also a language, because at the end of the day, just like there is human language, there is programming language. So now we have these AI systems like Claude Code, like Cursor, you might have heard of, or even Google's Gemini, or Codex from OpenAI. All of these are these AI systems which use a language model behind the scenes. So all of them use a language model behind the scenes, which is an AI model, and then they use that for writing the code. And the reason why these language models are actually able to sort of write this out, I'm just going to increase the size really well. That's because just like the language models have learned human languages, they have also learned the language of coding, and so they are able to write out that code. Now, that's the foundation of why we are here, because we have now, with the development of these language models like ChatGPT, these tools which can really help to essentially write code which usually humans would have written. One of those tools is built by this company known as Anthropic. And that tool is known as, I'm not going to call it this, but I'm just going to open this up. That tool is known as Claude Code. So this tool behind the scenes uses a language model for writing code. I'm going to like send a link of it on Zoom chat. But I will also demo it for you folks so that you can see how it actually works. Now, I'm going to skip this and we're going to come back to this. So let's go back here. So essentially, Cloud Code, it's able to sort of write code. Like I said, software is just made up of code that's written in programming languages in files. So Cloud Code is able to read and write codes. The biggest benefit of a tool like Cloud Code is because you are talking to a language model, you can tell it what you want in natural language, and then it's actually able to generate the code that writes the software. We are going to see how that actually looks when I actually run Cloud Code. Now, the one thing to keep in mind, and this is the very important part to sort of understand here, is that when a tool like this is built, which basically writes the code for software, it can't just be like, oh, give me, like, just build me the entire software in just one line. The tool has to do a lot of things. And that's the one part I do want to talk about here a little bit. Now, the way Cloud Code works is, and this is the most sort of like the important part of what makes it really good. And this might be very obvious, but it's important to understand. When you are using Cloud Code as your system for writing code, it does everything in a three-step loop. So what it essentially does is it reads the relevant context. Now, what that means is when you are talking to Cloud Code, you will give it instructions of what you want to build. So that is relevant context, but your context might be, let's say if you're a product owner and let's say you have a PRD, a product requirements document. Let's say you are a UX designer. You have a UX mockups that you have made. Let's say you have a startup founder and you have feedback from actual customers that you want to use. So all of that information, the model, the AI model is going to read. So that's what Cloud Code does first, and that's what makes it really cool because it's not just like it can write code. The first thing it does is it tries to capture all the context of what it is supposed to build. This is something you will see me sort of speak over and over again, that context is very important. And so what happens in an agentic loop is Cloud Code reads all of that context. Then it decides that, okay, this is the context of what I'm supposed to build. Then it actually writes the code. It actually writes the actual components, the files that will make the software work. And then at the final step, it also does a check that did I actually meet the original requirements that people had given me. Now, the reason why Cloud Code sort of became very, very like powerful, that's because it was its ability to understand the files that it needs and its ability to check whether the final code is right is very good. These models are actually able to do that really well. And because of that, it's actually able to generate code that one wants for actually building the software. I got a question. Will the slides also be made available? Absolutely, Roberto. The slides will be made available. Okay. Now, so whenever like you sort of like essentially use Cloud Code, this is the mental model of using that AI model. The first thing is you have to give it all the information it needs for building the software it wants to build. Then it decides that, okay, this is what I'm actually building. I'm going to write the code. It checks against your context. It fixes if something is broken, and then it gives you a final report. So that is the mental model of a coding agent like Claude Code. Now, I am going to sort of start doing a very quick demo, and at that time I will pause for any questions. But if people do have any questions, they can put it on Zoom chat as well. Okay, so let's go back here. Now, the way to use something like Claude Code is to essentially download the Claude software, which I did download from the Anthropic's website. If you go to Anthropic here, and then you basically write Anthropic download Claude, and it will give you a link, it will give you information. I'm just going to give it a second for it to for you to be able to download it. So it will tell you how to try it. You can try it and then you can actually work it on your system. I'll put a link to that on Zoom chat. AI generated code in the end. Yes. Great question, Roberto. Because the Claude Code is using an AI model in the background, I will talk about that in a second. It will be generating, AI generated code. I got a question. Oh no, not a question. Okay, cool. Thanks for your question, Roberto. Okay, awesome. Now let's get back to this. So I'll be doing an initial demo of how it looks, and then I'll pause for questions. Now, like I said, it is an agentic loop. It is using an AI model for writing the code. So basically, if I open my Claude, this is how the interface of it looks like. Now, within this interface, you have a home, which is also for your general Claude stuff, and then you have Claude Code, which where you actually like start to write the code, where you can actually ask it to write code. Now, the first thing to understand is, remember I said that any kind of code or any kind of software is made up of code which is written in files. Well, typically you organize your software files in a folder. And so what you do in the beginning of when you start is you click here, you click on open folder, and then I created a folder for us. So I'm going to open that. And this is the primary folder where Cloud Code is going to be doing its thing. Now, what that essentially means is you have told Cloud Code that, okay, this is where I want you to actually write the actual code. Now, I did get a question. Also, people can ask questions in the larger group as well. To build a software, is it good practice to give instructions in .md file? So I'm going to talk about that in a bit, about the markdown files as well, Shantanu. But yes, it does help. You don't have to, but it does help. We are going to cover that in the spec-driven development side of things. Let me know if I answered your question. Okay, so now this is an empty folder. This doesn't have any code. Now, typically when I'm building software, I won't actually be looking at the code in Claude Code. So typically I would have a system like this, which is known as an IDE, Integrated Development Environment. And this is where I would typically put all my software and coding files. So I have Claude Meetup as the folder where I can actually write, like I'm going to be putting all my code. It's not there yet. Okay, awesome. Now, when I'm interfacing with Cloud Code, like I said, Cloud Code is using an AI model in the background. So the first thing that I would typically do is to check what model am I using. Now, in this case, for doing that, there is a command known as model. So that's typically the first thing that I do. Now, when I run that command, and I'll explain what a command is. So when I do this, I click enter. I get to choose which model am I using. Now, I am going to choose an older model because I don't want to run out of tokens in this session. So I am going to be using an older model. But Claude itself has a lot of different AI models. Their most recent one is Opus 4.8, which is it's more useful for very complex tasks that you do. There is Fable, which was the one that got banned by the US government. It is back now. It's supposed to be very powerful. I have not used that. And there is Sonnet, which is the most common one. And then there is Haiku, which is like a model that is good for very small specific tasks. And so I'm going to be using Sonnet because Sonnet will sort of help me preserve the number of tokens that I'm using because I only have a certain number of tokens. Now, when you are sort of utilizing Cloud Code, right? Um, at this point, when my system is set up and I have pointed it to the right folder, now when I'm asking it to write software, I have to tell it what do I want to build. Let's say I'm going to tell it build a basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript website with uh, for a simple blog. Let's say I do this. Very basic instruction, and I've just asked it to sort of create a very simple website for me. Now, when I do this, what's going to happen is it will start to essentially read all the relevant files. And the first thing that you will notice is that it will sort of go here and it will start to create the coding files that I need. Now, in this case, the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are your actual coding files. It didn't have any files in the beginning, But what it is now actually able to do is it will actually write all the stuff and it will start to write the code, it will start to set it up. So it's going to take a few minutes, but it is starting to write the code. It's not finished, it's actually doing it right now. Now, while this is happening, if people have any questions, feel free to ask me, folks. You can put it on Zoom chat or you can also raise your hand and I can unmute you. Either of those things work. But while this is happening, I'm going to ask you folks if any questions till now. Anything that was unclear when I create coding Cloud Chat, it right? What is the benefit of Cloud Code? Advantage of cursor over Cloud Code. Okay, great questions, folks, while this is happening. Brennan has a question. When I create code in Claude, what it writes, what is the benefit of Claude Code? Um, I think the biggest benefit is that if there are two different kinds of benefits. The first benefit is if you are somebody who understands coding but isn't really super interested in actually learning to write code, but you know it well enough that you want to build a product. So the biggest benefit is that you don't have to sort of spend time in understanding writing your own code. It will automate the code writing for you. So that's one biggest benefit. The second benefit is, let's say you have an idea that you want to do. Sometimes what can happen is you have an idea, you want to build that software, but there is friction, right? If you have to hire a developer, go and ask someone else to do it, then your entire motivation, your dopamine might go away. So sometimes Cloud Code, the biggest benefit, secondly, is that it really allows you to quickly get going, and you can actually build something dirty and quick and dirty, and then sort of show people and actually see the product in action. The third biggest benefit that I would say is that Claude Code, because it's powered by an AI model, it is able to learn a lot of context of existing code. So it can help you write new features faster. It can help you debug faster. Now, how much faster? It is something that nobody in the industry right now knows. It's an open question of how faster Claude Code makes you go. You can hear on both ends. There are people who believe it doesn't do anything. There are people who believe that everything is automated. But that's like an open question that we'll see as time progresses. Let me know, Brennan, if I answered your question. Kevin has a question. What is the advantage of cursor over VS Code? So the first thing is, Kevin, is that VS Code is not run by an AI model. It's a basic IDE. Cursor is powered by GPT. Cursor is powered by AI models in the background. And then you can choose which AI model you want to use. So Cursor is very like AI first software development. VS Code, you can plug in an AI model if you want, but you can just do coding the old school way as well. Does the basic instruction consume more tokens than a specific instruction? I yes and no, Shantanu. It depends. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It really depends on what your instruction is. So I'm going to sort of like be diplomatic about it because I don't think there is a one-way answer. You really have to like try it. Is Claude Code similar to GPT's Codex? Yes, it is. It is very much similar to GPT's Codex. It is an AI model that writes code for a software that you are building. No need to use CC for non-coding work, correct? I don't know what CC is, James, if you can clarify. And Kevin, is the code generated owned by you in terms of copyright? It is. Uh, yes. The code that's generated, that software generated is owned by me. Having said that, it's debatable that like how much information of what I'm building is going to Anthropic. We did a separate session of using local large language models, so you can totally do that as well. But yeah, but the code itself is owned by me. Claude, no need to use CC for non-coding work. Yeah, Claude Code is more specialized for coding work itself. Okay, amazing questions, folks. I'm hoping everyone is learning, but I'm also then going to quickly show what happened here. So, when I gave it a very basic instruction, right, built a basic HTML CSS website for a simple blog, what it did was it sort of wrote those files. It sort of showed you what's included. It sort of talked about the home feed, the right post, the about page, like what are the different pages. And then you also have this. So, like if I click, like if I this open.html, it has like, it sort of created like a very, very dumb blog post. And then you have the index.html file. Now, let's open this in the browser if I can as well. Let's see if I can just do this. So I'll show this first. So now you have this. You have app.js, which is your JavaScript code that it wrote. There is index.html, and then there is style.css. So for people who understand this, HTML is your main thing that shows on the browser. This is for styling, and this is for anything dynamic. So it did sort of create all of that. Now, I also want to show you what happens like as you build more of your software. Now, typically, when you are building a software, you don't just want to keep it like this. You do want to put it on a behind a server so that then you can put it on something like AWS so that other people can also access it. So what I'm going to ask now, Claude, is to create a small server so that I can access this blog. So I'm going to say set up a small server to access this blog locally. Now, here comes the first sort of like the biggest sort of a change that I want to now talk about, which is that when you are giving your basic instruction to Cloud Code, it will totally write the code, it will totally do everything. But if you want it to sort of like think more, you want Cloud Code to do a little bit more work so that it does it in the right way, then you basically tell Cloud Code to plan and set up a small server. It's a very small change. So you're asking Cloud Code to be in the plan mode first, and then you are also asking it uh, first, let me verify the plan and then only build. So now this is a small optimization. In this mode, what's going to happen is Cloud Code is first going to actually create a very, like you can see it's entering the plan mode. So it will first give me a plan. So before actually like writing the code, doing anything around that, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to sort of give me a plan of like how it is going to make that code change. Now, this is very, very important because in my personal anecdotal experience, if you do have a plan, it does guide the Claude a lot better. So the one thing that you will notice is that like now there is a plan, there is context, it created an approach, it said what file it's going to create, and then it says that this is how the server is going to work. And now the reason why this is very cool, that's because if you make, just like in real life, right? If you're doing a task, planning is good. Same thing is true for Cloud Code. If you ask Cloud Code to do a plan, then it can sort of A, allow you to verify the plan, and B, give better context to Claude Code. And it also can help with your token optimization as well, as Avneet said. Okay, let's say I've read the code, the plan, I go here, and then I click on accept. Now, I'm going to do accept first, and then I'll show another auto accept stuff there. So now it's going to start to actually write the code. Now you see this. It will ask you what are the files that it should create. So I'm going to say allow it. I'm going to allow it to create the files that I need. I'll also do always allow so that I can actually like see how things are working. Again, the good thing is it will ask you the things that it is doing, and then obviously like you should look at and how it actually runs. And so let's say if I run this, this is what it's asking me to run. Oh, I actually can't run this here. I'm going to run it on my terminal. So 1 second. So this is a terminal, folks. Let's say server.js. And now here's the thing. You can already see like it is starting to show some errors. I think the error is because it's already working. Oh, it actually already ran it. So let's go back to Claude Code. What's the URL that it said? It's this one. Okay. Let me copy this, go back to the browser. And now you can see the blog is already there. So the one thing that you will notice is that it is actually showing up in a much more prettier manner here. That's because the Claude Code natively doesn't apply all the bells and whistles and all the CSS properly. But this is what it built. From that very basic thing, now I have it running on a web server as well that I did create right now using Claude Code. And now it is able to actually, I can open it in my browser. I can see what it's doing. I can write a new post. And it also has an about. So now you have a very basic version of a software actually running, and it's also running on a local server. We are not going to talk too much about like sort of how to put it on a production server. That's out of scope for today. But essentially, I'm hoping that people are able to start to understand the concepts. Now, once you have some of the files there, so if I go here, right, you will see that there is all of these different files that are created. This is the server, this is my main, sorry, let me just increase the size. This is my main HTML, JavaScript, CSS. Now, the one specific thing that you will notice is that now Claude has this created now this .claude folder. Now, the reason why that's important is any actions that you allow Claude to do or you want Claude to do, let's say, for example, you want it like, remember I clicked on accept certain things. And so what Claude does is it saves it in its settings. The reason why that's important is you don't want to keep retelling Claude the same thing over and over. So it writes all of that here so that if I create a new session of Claude Code on the same folder, it can also pick up the same thing. Now, I am going to pause here, folks. Any questions till this point before we sort of move on to more concepts on this? And folks, no question is bad question, so don't be shy. I'm gonna wait 15 seconds. To work with any programming language. Yes, you can use it for Python. Basically, it can write code in any programming language that you choose. If you remember when I started here, I started telling it just write it in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So JavaScript is a programming language. HTML, CSS are more formatting programming languages of sorts. And so I told it what thing to use. I could have totally told it to use Python or Java. It can sort of write code in any of them. Spec-Driven and Claude Code. Vigneshwar, that's in the part two of today. Right now, I'm just giving like a high-level introduction to Claude Code and sort of explaining what we are actually like, what does Claude Code does and what how it actually works. Okay, awesome. I'm going to give it 10 more seconds. Otherwise, we'll sort of learn some more things that you can do with Claude Code. When you make a change in the ID, would Claude Code automatically notice the change and work with the latest edit? Absolutely. Because your entire code, right? Everything is inside this folder. So is anything that you change here. Let's say I go here and I change this to my not daily blog, weekly blog, whatever. Now Claude Code will pick that up. So it will pick up the most recent context. If you remember in the slides, I think I was talking about this step where it reads all the relevant context. Part of the thing that Claude Code has is that it will read the most recent knowledge and then it will notice that edit. Let me know, Lee, if I answered your question. Okay. Next question would be, let's see. No, wait, is Cloud Code a separate download? It is. You don't like you have to install it in your system in different ways. You can do it a terminal install, which sort of looks something like this inside your terminal. But I do prefer the graphical user interface because it's easy. You can also use Cloud Code on the web. I have not played around with that too much, but that's also a way to use it. Have you experimented using Cloud to write Terraform CI/CD specs to deploy apps on AWS or Google Cloud? I don't know if it's the same, but I have not done it for Google Cloud, but in my day job, we do it for AWS. It works pretty well. We use Cloud Code and a little bit of Cursor for most of our like deployment instructions and all of those instructions for managing Kubernetes and stuff, both on GitLab and AWS using Cloud Code and 8 Cursor. It does work really well. We will talk about in spec-driven development how it sort of changes things a little bit, but for the most part, yes, it does work well. No need to, it's like metric, everything, they're gonna have to be the GPU in the cloud. Uh, yes, and you don't need Cloud Code for, I think I already answered your question, James. Okay, awesome. Cool. Keep the questions going for folks. I'll sort of move on. Okay, now, when you're working in Cloud Code, and now I'm going to start introducing some concepts, this screen that you are seeing right now is what is known as a session. So you will see this word session here. which basically means that you are creating a new session of an AI model to talk to your folder. Now, the same thing happens in ChatGPT as well, right? You create a new chat. It's the same concept, but in Claude Code terms, we do like to call it a session because that's the more accurate, because it's a session of coding that you are doing. Now, let's say I am developer A, right? And I have done all of this work. I built all of this code. Let's say I'm a developer B. Let's just call it Trust Workspace. And then I want this second developer as well. Now you see I'm in a new session. I clicked on new session. It's a new session. And I want this developer to also be able to work with this particular piece of code that we have written and maybe make a change. Maybe add a, let's say I'm adding I'm adding a dark mode to the website. Now, for doing that, right? When if I give it a command here, add a dark mode toggle, this will work. Like this will totally work. But the one thing that will happen is Claude will have to read all the files and all the context of what the app is, because each session is separate from each other, to understand what the code does and then actually do the work. To avoid that, if I go back here, there is a specific concept that we do that allows multiple sessions to share information with your code base. And that is known as this init command. Now, one thing I didn't specifically mention is Claude has this concept of command, which is basically you're telling Claude to do specific things. So when you already have written some code, the first thing that one typically does is basically use this init command. Now I'll show you what the init command does. I'm going to click on it. Now let's give it a couple of seconds. If you're okay, what's the question by Sai? If you're using Cloud Code in your day job, what about the security part of keeping your proprietary code is data leaks, NDA breaks, etc.? Okay, first of all, great questions. I'm going to allow this and I'll show you what this is. Let me know, Sai, if I have answered your question. If you are using Cloud Code, yes. Okay, so a couple of things to keep in mind. Let's say when an enterprise gets into an agreement with Anthropic that we are going to be using your Cloud Code, a lot of these things are a part of that agreement. That all the data is owned by us, all the information is owned by us. Claude cannot use the code that we are asking it to write for its internal training. So all of that goes into the enterprise contract that a company has with Anthropic. Because typically, if you are an organization using Cloud Code, you won't be using a personal user. You will try to create like an enterprise relationship with them, and your contract is what that will define that. Now, what so adding on top of that, one thing to keep in mind is that contract is no different from how enterprises work with other cloud providers. An example would be if I'm an enterprise who is putting their software is putting their software on AWS. So AWS, same thing can happen, right? AWS can also potentially look at my code, but then I have that same contract with them that like they can't look at my code, they can't actually do that. And so like that is an important sort of like, it actually goes into the contract that you write between the two. And depending on how tight that is, it's sort of dependent on that. Everybody's stealing or stealing from everybody, not yet. I do disagree a little bit, James. It's important. I think this is everybody's problem a little bit because at an enterprise level, you do sort of get a higher level of sort of checks and balance when you are working versus at a personal level. So I think like it's important to like sort of have these questions in place. And I love the fact that a recent graduate is asking that, because I think it's important to know like how the data is used. But typically that's how sort of the conversation sort of happens. Let me know, Saido, if we answered your question. Awesome. At the end of the every session, should you update the Claude.md file as a best practice? Great question. I'm now going to go back to Claude Code, but then folks keep going your questions and discussions. This is awesome. Oh yeah, there's another question. Is the web version of Claude Code part of the Claude website? Yes, it is. It is all run by Anthropic, so it should be there. Okay, now let's go back here and then we'll come back to questions. You see the init command that I wrote. Now, what the init command does is um, there's using a new session for a follow task consumes more tokens. Yeah, Vasant, so that's what I'm going to explain. So when you have a code base, right? And let's say you create multiple sessions on the same code base. Every time when you are creating a new session, it is going to consume a lot of tokens if it doesn't get an easier summary of what the code base does. Let's say I start a session A, it's going to read all my files and then it's going to understand what the code base does to do something. Then I go to session B, it's going to read all my files and then it's going to again learn and then actually do the work because each session is independent. To avoid that, this concept of initialization comes in. When you run this command, it creates a file in your folder known as claude.empty files. Now, let's talk about what that is. What claude.md files does essentially, and I'll show you not here, maybe I have like a view of it. Yes. Okay. So we'll talk about this, what it is in a second. But what this file does, and MD is basically markdown. Okay. So markdown is a format, just like you have .txt, .pdf. Markdown is a format which allows AI to easily understand context from text. So as you can see, Markdown has headings, it has subheadings, so AI can understand what is important, what is the part, like it can sort of understand the context better. Now, inside this file, Claude has written what this repo does. So now it has this, it talks about how to run this, it talks about the architecture of the code, it talks about the conventions of coding that it has done. Now, if you have this file created here, what's going to happen is, let me go back here. When I create a new session on this, right? It will automatically, Claude session will read the claude.md files and then it will have more context already of the app. It won't have to go through like the entire application to understand what it does. Imagine like this is hardly like 4 files in my application right now. But if you think about it for an enterprise, right? An enterprise, like for example, my day job where I work there, you can have thousands of files. Imagine if each session has to read all the files to understand what the app is doing. So this claude.md file is a very powerful tool because it already gives the important context of what the application does to Claude Code. Now, when I go here and say add a dark mode toggle, and when I click enter, let's see what it does. And yeah, James, that's very fair. The corporations are burdening the workers. That's very, very true. So now what it actually does is now it already knows what these different files are and it actually goes faster. It is able to like read more tokens and then it will also start to make some improvements like for example it's trying to do and then it will actually write the code. So I'm gonna wait for it to go ahead. You were trying to mention between using the new session. Could you please elaborate more? Does using the new session? Vasant, let me know if I answered your question by the way. Because that's what I was trying to say, that a follow-up session, if not more, might end up using like the same amount of tokens. Then you want to reduce the amount of tokens, and having this shared claude.md file can be very, very powerful. It's a markdown file. We'll talk about markdown in a second properly, but this can actually make Claude already understand your code base. Think of it like as a summary. Like it's a summary of what the app does, how the code is organized, and so Claude doesn't have to do that rework over and over again. So now if I go back here, let's see if I refresh this. Now it added a toggle. As you can see, it added that toggle. If I click here, it takes me to the dark mode. If I click here, it keeps it in the light mode. Now, so that's the most important part where let's go back here where it actually allows you to actually like this file, this shared file will make sure that every session is not starting from scratch and it will allow you to sort of like learn the different fundamentals. Like it will allow it to learn the fundamentals of what that app is and it will allow it to work tokens in a more efficient manner. Now I'm going to answer some questions. Is the web version of Cloud Code? Yeah, that's the same. Thanks, Roberto, for that question. The web version is the same as the downloaded version. Why do you use VS Code instead of using Cloud Code Desktop IDE? It's a personal preference. VS Code is easier for me. Also because I don't always just use Cloud Code. Sometimes I use inside VS Code cursor plugins and a lot of other things. So that's you can think of it like inertia of change. So I just prefer VS Code. You can totally do that as well. Do the tokens reset every 24 hours for or every month? Roberto, it really depends. If you run out of your tokens, then oftentimes it's after 2 or 3 hours it refreshes. But it depends on your plan. Are you on the free plan? Are you on the like paid plan? There's a lot of questions there. So you'll have to read the specifications of what plan you have, and then you will know when do they reset. How do you show the token used under your prompt window? I'll answer that. How much Cloud Code was used? Okay, awesome. So let's say I only wanna use no for this, right? Now, there is a command in Claude. And folks, again, when I'm saying command, you're just telling Claude to do something. I use a / for it. So when I do this, when I do usage, it will give me a lot of details. It will tell me how much this session cost. It will tell me the breakdown. It will sort of give me a lot of information here. So this is sort of one way of looking at your usage. For me, my usage will show up differently because I have like a pro plan, or I don't remember, but I have a paid subscription. So it sort of like connects in that way. Uh, but before I answer, let me know, Vasant, if I answered your question. Okay, so that's how you can see this. Now, I think there are other usages as well. There is also usage credits. Oh no, I think it just takes you to the UI. So that just will allow you to get more credits. Okay. So essentially, this is what you can use. I think there is a way to also see token counts, which I have forgotten. Yeah, there you go. So when you click here on the bottom, let me just increase it. You are able to see how many tokens are used. Now, this is a very important thing to understand. When it says this context window, right? It's basically talking about this entire session. And so it's going to basically show me how many sort of tokens I have used, what are the messages, what are the different things that it was doing under the hood. There's a lot that it does. We don't need to go into everything, but it sort of will talk about my limits and overall limits and when do they reset. So you can also click here, and then you can sort of see your token usage as well. Thanks, Brennan. Thanks for coming, and feel free to come and I'll share the video as well. I'll answer your question, Jennifer, in a second. What is meant by a session? So, great question, James. Every time when so if you use ChatGPT, you know how you can have separate conversations, like you open one conversation for one thing, another conversation for another thing. In Claude Code concepts, that's a session. So you have one session for writing code for doing A task, you have another session for doing a B task. So essentially, sessions is your individual threads of conversation that you are doing with Claude Code. Let me know, James, if that answered your question. So, like for example, right now, these are two sessions that we had. One is this session and this is another session. Okay, now Jennifer has a question. Can the Cloud MD file be used across different workspace projects, or does each project need a new separate .md file? You can do both. So let's say, I'm assuming, Jennifer, your question is, let's assume that this was your top level workspace, and let's say for the second, I create J project for Jennifer, and then you had this separate project. So this project can have its own Claude.md file. It's actually better if you have multiple projects under one big tree, then each of those projects should have their own Claude.md files, and then your vertical one can have the big one. What Claude is going to do is it's going to read all of them one by one. So it will read the top level, it will go to each folder and read all the Claude.md files automatically. So that is something that's totally doable. That's what we do it in my day job as well. Let me know, Jennifer, if I answered your question. Is these sessions are stored in local memory? Yes. So these sessions are stored in local memory. So there is I've forgotten where, but Claude maintains its session information in a root directory somewhere, and then all of that information is there. If you are on the enterprise plan, these sessions are also available on the cloud. So so I don't know if you guys have heard that term, but there are some companies who are forcing their developers to use tokens a certain amount and all of that token maxing. So that is possible because in enterprise plans, they can see how many sessions you are using, how many tokens are being used and all of that. So there is that sort of a way as well. But typically, if you don't have the enterprise plan, everything is local for you. Okay. And yeah, I can quickly show in the end VS Code with Claude James. That's great. Let me know, Jennifer, if I've answered your questions. If the Claude.md, both master and the individual files conflict, which one will it pick? It depends on the work item that you have and how you have written your Claude.md files. If in your master file you have written that, okay, prioritize the specific ones over the general one, then it's going to follow that. If not, then it's going to make its best guess of whichever information it seems more relevant. It is able to find discrepancies, so it will flag that, okay, your master file says this, but your actual reality is this. Should I update the master file? So it is smart enough to sort of reconcile, and if it can't, it will ask you those questions. Okay, awesome. Let's go back here. If I uninstall software, will the sessions get deleted? Great question, Vasant. I don't know. You'll have to ask Claude. So you can just ask Claude, will you delete the session if I remove you? But I actually don't know. I have not done that. Okay, I'll go back here. One more question. Do I have to connect my GitHub to Claude Code? Not really. My GitHub is not connected to Claude Code. It's just a folder I have on my local. You can if you want to, but um, I think in the web version, maybe you have to because it has to write code somewhere. So it might write it to your GitHub. So, but for me, I don't have to. You can use the terminal though. Call it. Yeah, sure. Okay, awesome. So we talked about session. We talked about how you can make tiny little changes to your actual website and to actually sort of work through that. Now, I do want to mention a couple of things before we go into the spec-driven side of what that actually means. Now, essentially, there are a lot of commands that Claude Code has. So if you press the forward slash here, you will see a lot of different commands. I have not covered a lot of them. There is a lot of different commands that are there. You can find a lot of commands on the Claude's official websites. That's its own separate thing. But Claude has a lot of things that you can do, which allows it to do various things. But my one key thing that I always sort of reiterate is that it's good to have this Claude.md file once you have written some code so that this Claude.md file has the source of truth about what your code is doing. It is also good to have separate sessions for different things rather than doing everything in one session. It's good to have different session for different kind of code that you are trying to write. And the final thing that I always want to say that remember when I was doing this, I said plan. So having a plan is really helpful. It allows you to verify what the thing is doing, but B, it also allows it to optimize its tokens a little better. So always asking for a plan is generally a good advice. Okay. Any codes and scripts generated with Cloud Code saved as separate files in your computer? Yes, they are. So if any codes and scripts are written, they are often in this .claude folder, and then they are only used for Cloud's own usage. Obviously, the product that I'm building, which is this, all of these files are here. Okay. So let's go back here. Nice. Now, so this is the basics of what Cloud Code level that I wanted to cover because I just wanted to give people a bit of a feel of like how it looks. I do want to pivot now a little bit to the spec-driven side of things. Let's go here. And I do want to talk about this, but before we go there, I'm going to give it one last call. Any questions, folks, till this point? Can regular code also generate code? If so, what is the difference between that and Cloud Code? The biggest difference is regular Claude can give you a script file that you can use, but the purpose of Claude Code is to build software. So it can write multiple components of your software all together. It can get all of that context together. Whereas typically in normal regular Claude, you would just use it to maybe write a simple Python script. So you can totally do that. But with Claude Code, it allows you to have the entire software. Plus, it is also optimized for writing code. So it has the things that you need, like code review and other things that you might need to help you write good quality code. So it's sort of optimized for that experience. Conventional method and how spec-driven is different. Uh, Please go over conventional development method and how spec-driven is different. For sure, we'll talk about that a little bit, James. But I want to just give it one more minute if people have any questions till now. Okay, awesome. Now, let's talk a little bit about spec-driven development. Now, I want to explain what the concept is a little bit. It is not a very unknown concept. It's also not a new concept, but this has become very important in the cases of in the case of the kind of work that we are doing, which is using Claude Code for writing software. Now, essentially, the point of spec-driven development is that you are telling in a very structured format what you want Cloud Code to build, and then the Cloud Code is so you are writing it in a disciplined, structured way, so that then Cloud Code can have all the context that it needs for building that software. Now, the question that James asked, and this might come up in our brains as well, like why is it important? Why are we talking about this? For two big reasons. Number one, generally, all software development is spec driven, first of all. Even without the concept of AI, right? There was a product owner who had to write a product requirement document. That is the spec, that is the specification of what has to be built. And then the developer might actually build that software, and then you will have your thing that you want. Now, the reason why it's important in this world is your spec and how well you write your spec is very is something that the AI model is gonna help AI model not go off track. It's gonna help it to not hallucinate. It will also help it to know what the actual purpose is. So let's say if I go back to how I wrote my code. So when I went here, right, if you go back up, I sort of told my AI model build a basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript website for a simple blog, right? Now, this is a spec, if you want to call it, but then this doesn't tell me what the purpose, doesn't tell the AI what the purpose of the website is. Who are the users of the website? Why is that website being built? So the core concept of a spec-driven development is how do you actually give it the blueprint of what it has to build? And that allows an AI model to A, use tokens more efficiently, to not build the wrong thing, to actually identify any discrepancies in your requirements, and to actually turn that into an actual thing that has to be built. Now, if I was to write this entire thing into a spec, into a proper specification, one way of doing that, and I'm gonna go back here, is I could totally write a lot of things here. I can just type all the requirements here and that will work. But it's better to be organized about it, right? And for doing that, the best practice that I have seen is to have what is known as, let's say, a spec.markdown file. Remember, we looked at the spec.md file. So having a spec.m, so we looked at markdown files like claude.md. So having a spec.md file, what it does is it allows you to sort of put all that information that you have from a product requirement standpoint inside a file that Claude will always have access to. So let's go back to my slides. Where are they? Let's say I want to write a spec for the same thing. Now, for writing a markdown file, like I told you, a markdown is just a text file with headings and stuff. So let's say I want to write a goal. So let's say I say the goal is build a personal blog, food blog, or rather saying that to provide insights on how to cook foods better. Let's say that is the purpose, that is the goal of my blog. Another spec, let's say I want to write is the rules. So let's say my rules are the blog posts can only be 100 words long. The users should be able to like or dislike the blog posts. And let's say I sort of, this is my basic spec. There are more things, there are more bells and whistles that you can write. But let's say then I basically sort of have a very basic spec where I have put the goal and I have put the rules. Now, once I have this, and now this is a very dumb example, but I'm hoping that people are able to follow. Rather than asking Claude to sort of just like a single line, I'm going to tell it to, okay, plan and rebuild this website using spec dot, sorry, MD file that has been added. Now, what Claude is going to do now is it is going to essentially read those specs. And we will talk a little bit more about how it sort of like why does it actually work better. Now, in this spec, I have given it more I have given it very high level context. If you notice, I didn't tell it it should be HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I didn't tell it how to write. All I said was this is the purpose and these are the rules that I want to follow in my website. Now, when I go back into my Claude Code, it is now going to change things. It's going to look at this, it's going to look at different things. It's going to rebuild the thing based on the spec. I'm gonna give it a couple of minutes to give me a plan. I'll start to ask questions. Also have a coding algorithm, if so, what's doing that? And I think Claude Cowork, Robert, is for your other things. It helps you work with Excel sheets, Google Docs. I have not used it too much, so I'm not 100% of an expert, but Claude Code is more specific for software development. Can the PRD be copy pasted straight in spec.md files? Let's get to that question in a second, James, because yes and no. It depends on how you have written the PRD. So I'm going to talk about like how to actually write if you have a PRD into a spec that is more efficient for Claude Code versus just copy pasting your PRD. What does a PRD mean? Oh, sorry, Kevin. We shouldn't be using shorthands. I forget. I also use that. PRD means product requirement documents. So essentially, in the, let's call it the legacy way of writing software, which is also still the recent way, you would typically have like Claude Code and all of that. Essentially, like you would typically write your requirements as these big documents that are written by product owners, and then the software developers would follow that to build the actual software. I'm just gonna do this. Ta-da. Okay, and now it sort of created a different website. It sort of changed how things work. It added this thing where you can have likes and dislikes. It has a read more. It has a bunch of stuff that it added. But basically, now a couple of things happened. The first thing that happened was, and this is why this file is important, rather than me telling it just make a generic food blog, I gave it the actual requirements of what am I trying to do. So I gave it like, okay, this is why I want to write this blog. These are the rules, only 100 words. People have likes and dislikes. Now, the reason why this can become very important is for two things. First, how you write this file plays a huge role in how these tools build the software. And the first very basic rule of thumb, if I have to like, let's say, like just write like some rules of thumb of how, or maybe not here. Maybe I'll write it. Let me create a new file. Uh, how to write specs.md. Okay. So if I have to talk about like some rules of thumb, right, of how to like do this, the first thing to remember is focus on the what. So your requirements, your specs, they should talk about what is the thing that has to be built, not how to build it. So so let's say if I'm saying, okay, build me a blog using uh, let's say I'm being very specific, Python, JavaScript, etc. Then I'm actually going into the how as well. I'm saying that, okay, rather than building this, you also tell me this is the technology. I'm telling it everything that it needs to do. But if to actually leverage the power of these models, my personal experience has been that don't focus on the how of how to build it. Initially, especially when you are building a prototype or something basic, give it the basically what it has to build. So tell it the what. Tell it like what are the things that what is the actual product you want to build. And the second thing that I always sort of talk about is specifying what not to build. So let's say, for example, if I'm building a blog, it might be important for me to specify that I don't care for comments on the blog post. I don't care for pagination. I don't care for vertical scroll or horizontal scroll. So those are the two basic things that one has to translate your specs into, which is what it has to build without going into the how of how it should build it. And secondly, what not to build, what's out of scope, as product owners like to call it. The third thing typically that's important for this system to have is who are the users. This can play a very big role. So let's say if in my spec I had said that, let's say the users are people, chefs, right? Let's say the users are chefs. Now, what that might make is it will make Claude Code realize that, okay, my blog has to be useful to a chef. Versus if I say new noobs learning to cook. So it will change the look and feel of how your sort of blog looks based on the information that you provide in the specs. So it's important to sort of talk about what you are building, what not to build, who are the users, and let the AI figure out the how part of how to actually do the building. Now, one last thing, which is optional, it depends on whether you need it or not, is if you have sometimes, you know how like we sometimes visualize things like a mock-up, like a UX mock-up or something. That is definitely something that's very useful. So I do give it a UX mock-up. There are ways that you can convert your UX mock-up into markdown files and give it to Claude Code. It's a separate thing, and I'm not also not a UX expert. But you can also connect your UX mockups into your Claude Code to actually make it write the code and make it understand what the purpose is. So the more clearer you are with the purpose of spec-driven development, the more easier it is for Claude to understand how to actually like write that code. And then it is able to sort of be focused, and then you can leave the heavy lifting of actually building the thing using the specs. And yes, Roberto, this is an example of Claude Code AI agent at work. But that's what we have been doing in the entire session. Now, when you are writing the specs, the second benefit that you get, and that is sort of like the hidden benefit of all of this, I'm just going to delete this file so that it doesn't confuse my agent. But basically, this file, let's keep it chefs. This file is a shared context. I think Vanessa or somebody had asked about this question. This file is now a or Jennifer had asked, is a shared context between all your Cloud Code sessions. Because now your specs actually live inside your code. And because your specs are inside your code, now if I start a new session, right? If I go, let's say, let's go back to my this. If I go, let's close this here. And if I'm starting a new session, it already has access to that spec.md file. So it further helps Claude understand what it is actually doing and what the app is actually doing. You can even take it a step further. You can go here and you can say update Claude.md with the spec.md file changes. And what this will do is it will update this shared context in your Claude.md with the specs that you have written. And now after that, every time, whenever you are starting a new session, your Claude doesn't have to like re-understand everything. It already has the context of, okay, this is which was built. So if you go back in here, you will notice that it will, let's see, yes. So it will actually add product rules. So it will add this is the thing that's being built. It already had the conventions, but it will also add any new things it added, but it will also add this specific product thing, which then is now available that it is always able to sort of pick that up. Now, okay, I have a question. What are the mandatory files Claude automatically reads? Claude spec.md, others. Amazing question. So I don't have a full list, but Claude.md is read um, every time. So Claude.md, all the Claude.md files are read whenever Claude starts a session. It also reads skill.md files. We have not talked about it today, but skills are its own separate topic we'll cover in the future. But it also reads any skills that you have. It actually may or may not, I forget, read spec.md by default, but that's something you can mention in your Claude.md file that for doing any work, read this spec. Even if you don't mention that, it will run into that file and it will end up reading it. So I have usually found it's okay on both sides. But if you want to be more specific, then what you can do is I can tell it update Claude.md to ensure future Claude sessions read spec.md files. And so let's see how it updates it. And now if I go here, where does it say spec.md? So you will notice here, it will say that before starting any implementation work, read all the MD files in the repo, and then it will make sure that it's reading it. So you can sort of make it mandatory for your Claude to always like sort of read all the claude.md files. MD files, including Claude files.md files, including AI generated code and script files. Yes, they are. They are written by Claude Code right now, Roberto. Let me know, Kevin, if I answered your question. There are other files too. I don't have a full list. You can find it on the Claude's Anthropic's website that it automatically reads. Can you have a session on skills? Yeah. We'll be doing a separate session on skills in the future. That's its own other thing. Okay, let's go back here. So now that is the basic of spec-driven development, where essentially what you do is you essentially like write down a spec like this, and then once you have that spec, you use that spec, you review that spec, and then your system builds against it. Now, I got a very interesting question, which is, can I use the product requirement documents as specs? Now, I think James, you had asked that. It depends on how you have written your PRDs. Oftentimes, product requirement documents have a lot of stuff. They have like customer numbers, which are maybe not that important. They might have implementation details of how to write code. So it can really depend on how your PRD is written. To make it efficient, it's important to have as simple representation as possible, which is why I just like, if I sort of like, I don't have, oh yeah, I have this very basic version of like the goal, the rules, the users, very simple version. So it's important to like take your big PRD and cut it down into very basic things that the model needs to know. So that's where I would, but I have also totally seen people upload their product requirement documents, and that does work. My only suggestion would be to convert it into markdown files rather than copy pasting them, because then it also does the additional benefit of any future AI sessions. They will always know what your product does, and they will also always be able to read those requirements rather than having to like copy paste them every time. So it does help. So it becomes your repository of requirements as well. But it helps to have a very structured version of the skills rather of the specs rather than having the entire everything from the PID. Some of it may or may not even be relevant. Let me know, James, if I answered your question. Okay, awesome. I'm gonna wait for more questions. Okay, actually, let's go back here. Where is it? Yes. Now, Now, another benefit, which is a side benefit of all of this also, is that if you do have your specs written down of what you want to build, you can also then collaborate, right? If you have it on a file, you can share that file with someone, they can give you feedback. So it also helps you if you are working in a collaborative manner. And it also helps you maintain a history of like, okay, this was the original idea, this is how it changed. So I've seen people do a lot of versioning as well. So oftentimes you have spec underscore one, let's say v1, and then over time what people do is they have a new file, they call it spec underscore v2.md. So you can also have a history of how your code base has changed over time using this. So it also helps you sort of maintain that. Now, right now, I have sort of showed you a YOLO version of writing specs, where I'm just writing like a spec.md file and giving it. There are standards that exist in the market that can help you maintain a good quality specs. Now, there are two very very big standards. The one of the more famous spec standards that exists is known as this concept of open spec. So I'm going to open this now. What OpenSpec does is it has an opinion about how to write the specs. So the way OpenSpec works is it helps you write your specs in a very structured way. I'm going to try and show you that. Let's go here. Let's go here. I think I have that command installed, or maybe not. I actually don't have it installed here. Give me one moment. I will install that. Mm. Once again, folks, I'll just set that up, and it's a technical session, so these things happen. Give me 1 second. And until then, folks, feel free to put questions in. Hmm. Just gonna set that up. Otherwise, I might be able to show this to you in a different repo that I did install. Let's see. Let's create a new session and then let's open the folder. Wait, I might have it here. Skid. Oh, folks, give me 1 second. I'll just set that up. But till then, folks, if people have questions, feel free to ask. Okay, yeah, I do have one. Let's see. Okay, yeah. So I'm not using the same folder as I was using before, so I'm using a different folder. It's something that I was testing around with, but basically, let's go back to what I was talking about. OpenSpec is an opinionated way of writing the spec files, and the way it works is you have to sort of install it in your system. And once you do have installed, so let's say I want to install it in the blog that I was doing. So what I would do is I would go here. I'm just going to increase the size. And this is the terminal, folks. And I'm just going to do this. I'm going to install OpenSpecs in my actual repo, in my actual place. And then I think I'm going to do OpenSpec init. And then I'm going to choose Claude Code, hit enter. Okay, so the first thing that you will see that has happened is, let's go to a new session. Let's go back to where we were before. Open the folder, Cloud Beta. Okay, so the first thing that you will notice in my repo here is that it created a .openspec folder, and then inside Claude, now you see a lot more things. You are seeing something known as skills. Now, what OpenSpec does is it gives you a set of commands that you can use for actually writing the specs. So for, let's say, I want to sort of create a new blog website here. So what I would do is, let's say I want to reload the skills. Let's reload the skills. 1 second. Didn't pick that up. It's the new skills that are added via OpenSpec. I'm just going to give it a second so that it can actually add those skills that I added. And folks, skills is a separate session. Okay, so now there are those new skills. Okay. Now, you will see this new command that has popped up, which is known as OPSX. What this does is it actually allows you to write specs in a more disciplined way. So what I would typically do is I would do OPSX propose and I would say make a food blog. And now it's going to take a few moments. But what this is going to do is it's actually going to try and create a more structured specs. I wrote specs in a very YOLO format, but it is going to try and create specs in a very, very structured way. I'm going to just give it, put it in. Yeah, let's just say it's going to take a few minutes, but I'll show you the difference in the specs. Like my specs were very crude, but these specs are a lot more structured. Okay. Till then, folks, if any questions till now, feel free to ask. And I apologize for the technical issue. These things happen. It's gonna write a lot more files than I did. Like I just created a spec.md file, which is a very basic one, V1, V2, but it's going to write a lot more things, and I'm going to like sort of show you guys once it's done. Mhm. Kevin has a question. Any books to read on this topic? My recommendation would be go through Claude Code's official docs. They're amazing, very well written. I would just read them. If you can understand all of that, I think that's more than enough for all of this. And same for OpenSpec. I'll share a link. If you want to use OpenSpec, it's actually well documented, very easy to use. So it's actually pretty great. I'm gonna give it a second and you will see how the difference in specs is. Now, when OpenSpec does its thing, it sort of creates four different files. The first thing it sort of does is it sort of creates a proposal file. So let's go back here. Inside OpenSpec, um, inside changes, the first thing that it creates is a proposal file. Now, the reason this proposal file is a lot more structured. It sort of adds a why, it talks about the changes it has to make, it talks about the new capabilities that has to be added, and then it talks about what are the changes it needs to make. So OpenSpec is opinionated about how to write specs. So the first thing it writes is a proposal file. Then the second thing it writes is the design file. It still doesn't go into too many details of how, but it now gives you a technical architecture of how the software should be. Again, this file you can choose whether you want or not because you might already want this AI to figure out the technical architecture. But OpenSpec is a little bit more opinionated, so it does give you like a design.md file. This is the file that you would typically get approved by a technical person to see like, okay, does the broad what the technical implementation might be is fine. And then it sort of breaks down the entire piece of work into individual tasks. So it sort of breaks down the big piece of work into smaller tasks. So it sort of like gives you a very detailed spec plan of how to build the software. Now, if you are building something very small, like this blog that I was making, which was dumb, you don't really need to use OpenSpec. But if you are building a bigger software, it really helps to have this more structured format because then you can read it, you can take the help of a technical person, you can take the help of other people, and then you can review those specs and get a sense of like, okay, is this what I actually want the AI to build? Now, OpenSpec is not the only standard. There are more. There is a standard that's followed by, I think, Amazon. It's known as the Kiro standard. So if I go here, if I write Kiro specs, they have their own standard. I'll send it on Zoom chat. That's also another one. They are all basically fancy ways of saying that different ways of how you can tell Claude Code or any agent what to do. All of them have some things in common. They try to be very clear about what has to be built, but they all have some of their own quirks. You can play around, you can see what works for you. But the purpose of them is to sort of so that you are able to sort of guide your AI into a more structured way, and B, so that your AI always has context of what it built. Because if your PRD documents are in Google Docs and stuff, a new AI agent may not know what you had built, but having your specs as a part of your code can really make it easy for an AI agent in its session to actually be able to sort of understand what it is doing, and every new session will have access to this context. What are .yaml files? Great question, Kevin. .yaml file are structured files that are used pre-AI. They are used for configurations. They are used for like I forget what its full form is. Let's see. Human readable. Yeah, it's like a uh, it's sort of like a structured way of giving information to your code. They are used in deployments, they're used in 100 different places. They're not specific to AI. I haven't seen YAML being used for specs till now, but maybe people are, so it could be a thing. Could you tell how the OpenSpec similar tool be used in writing specs for a brownfield project? Okay, so let's say you have a brownfield project, right? That's what I was sort of trying to do. I guess it becomes unclear because it already has files, but basically, once you have integrated OpenSpec into your Cloud Code, it gives you access to these commands, OPSX, all of these different commands. The command that you would start using is propose. So the propose is what you are telling OpenSpec that, okay, I want to build this. Give me potential specs. Now, if you want to, I forget, is a brownfield project a new project or is it an existing project? I just realized I explained it as a greenfield project. Sometimes I forget all the technical terminologies. Let's see. What is a brownfield project? Oh, modifies an existing thing. Okay, okay, it's existing. Okay, thanks. Sorry, I took it in the wrong direction. So let's say if you have an existing code base, right? Then what you can do is OpenSX has this command known as explore. You can use this to sort of make it understand the current code and to give it context of what it already has built. So you can totally use yeah, thanks, Ashish. You can totally use the explore command, which can then give you, which can then tell OpenSpecs to sort of like, okay, uh, read through the code base and let's say, tell me a new feature that I should build. This is a sort of a random command. And this will allow it to sort of understand the brownfield nature of the work, which is essentially all the stuff that is already there. I will say though, let me know if this answers your question properly, Vigneshwar. But in brownfield projects, before even you do open specs, I would run the init command because that's the first thing. Init will allow AI to create a claude.md files, which already sort of gives it the context of everything that it already has. But if you want to use open spec, then they have an explore command. And the explore command then, as you can see, can read the existing code. It can see what it has, and then it can see like it doesn't have tag based filtering. And let's say the app has tags, and then so it sort of will give me ideas of what I can build. And then you can like I can then tell it that okay, I actually want to make this change, write the specs for it. I will say though, we use this command a lot in our existing code base in my day job because we have a very old 12-year-old app. And so we do use it to identify technical debt and all of that stuff. So you can use init or you can use if you're using OpenSpec Explore. I'm sure Kiro also has its own command. All the spec-driven frameworks have some way for you to explore and brainstorm on the existing code base. Okay, awesome. Keep the questions going, folks, but to sort of just summarize as we're close to the end, these are the two concepts we wanted to cover. Claude Code is the first one. If you haven't used it, I would say download it, get the free version. I don't know if they still have it actually, but at least start playing around with it, give it command, sort of give it the right context. That's one. And then the spec driven is more disciplined way of giving it the requirements so that it can follow that and it can work through that. Now, uh, I do want to quickly talk about one thing. I think somebody had asked me this question about VS Code and having the Claude plugins. I think if I'm not wrong, VS Code has a Claude Code extension. So you can install this extension if you want to use Claude Code inside VS Code. And then this extension totally can allow you to like sort of, you can click here. And whatever I was doing inside my Claude Code, I can totally do it here. I will have to log into Claude through this. I'll have to do something like this to log in to actually connect to my own Claude. But you can run it here. I just prefer to run it here because I find this prettier and easy to look at. Okay, folks, we are at the end. I'm going to open this up now. Any questions, folks, till this point? You can use the raise hand emoji or you can also ask it on Zoom chat. Can the product requirement document Jira story be used as a source for spec writing or is it duplicate? No, I would say that's what you should do. You should take everything that like for example, in my day job, the way we do it is we look at the AHA, it's a portal that exists for product ideas. So we get all the context from there. We get the context from Jira stories. We get the context from Salesforce, I think. And then we combine it and then drill it down into specs for the AI agent. We just make sure that those specs exist inside the code base so that whenever I'm using an AI agent, it's able to have that context and build on top of it. You will have a little duplication though. That's a workflow that we also had to figure out how to manage, but it's not that big of a hassle and it goes a long way in giving AI the context it needs for building future improvements. Let me know, Vigneshwar, if I answered your question. Folks, I'm going to give it a couple of minutes. We are at the end. Before, if people are starting to drop, I do want to mention a couple of things. Next week we have another event. So if people want to join us for that, we're going to look at like improving workflows, how to sort of use generative AI tools like ChatGPT, Gemini in a more productive way. That's different from prompt engineering, but more like how to use those tools better. So we do have that session coming up. So if people want to come and join us next Saturday, please do. And if people are dropping, I do want to mention that we are also on LinkedIn. So please follow us. But folks, this is an open time for any questions. If you have a question, ask it on Zoom chat. If you have any, if you want to unmute yourself, you can use the raise hand emoji for it. No worries, Lee. And folks, if you can leave us a review on Meetup, either way, whether you liked it or you didn't, it will be great to get feedback. Uh, This was super cool, folks. You asked a lot of great questions, and we are all learning this together. So it's actually super cool, but I'm going to give it like a couple of minutes if people have any open questions for me. How to break out functions so I can debug easier. Okay, so Dan, I'm assuming Dan King, are you using Claude Code? Yes. Okay, awesome. My suggestion would be use the code review tool. So essentially, I use code review and then say analyze the code and tell me how to make it more modular, let's say. And then that will do it for you. So I use code review tool for it. Vasant, any group or community? It's all on Meetup, Vasant. So let me give a link 1 second. So everything is hosted on Meetup. We share all the recordings on Meetup as well. We have our Meetup community. So, and typically this is the forum that we use where we share all our recordings and everything. So until now, it's that we will figure out some other more async way of doing things in the future. Uh, does Claude Code? Let me know, Dan, if I answer. Sorry, I got distracted. Dan, let me know if I answered your question. Yes, okay. Does Claude Code automatically debug and refactor code without human input? To an extent, it does, but if it's a large repo, it's better to like sort of give your own it like to sort of tell it to do it. It does do it to some extent, but sometimes you do have to be very structured about it. So it's not going to do everything for you. You do need the human input there. James, thanks for the feedback, James. I didn't realize that it's hard to see the presentation on the web. I will take a look and I'll fix that. Thank you for that. And folks, this is our meetup. If you want to like join us, super cool, folks. Thank you so much for all the questions. I'm going to give it 1 more minute, but please join us for our future sessions. This was a lot of fun discussing this with you folks. Roberto, it does and it doesn't. You can tell it to give you updates. So you can tell it like, oh, before you write a piece of code, tell me what you are doing and it will do that. So it's on you. A lot of these questions, Roberto, though, you will answer once you start to use it. So I would suggest use it and then sort of get that feedback. Yeah, totally. It's a continuous session, Roberto. You can constantly keep going on it. Again, my suggestion would be start using it. That will tell you like all of this. Okay, last call, folks. Any questions? I think Donald, you shared something. How do you think of that tutorial? Sorry, uh, Can you clarify what you mean, Danquin? And so, Meet, the next, you can see all of our things on Meetup, but the next one is on, we're going to look at like how to use ChatGPT and these tools for better productivity. It's this one. I've sent it to you on Zoom chat. Oh, Claude, how do you think of tutorial? I think it's fine. I don't think it's bad, but I do find that, again, I don't like too many async things because I think it's better to have live interactivity. But I think it is a pretty decent tutorial. I do like their documents more though. Like their blog and documents, in my opinion, are much better than the tutorials. Oh, a good question, Donald. So the design doc that you shared, I assume the design doc that you shared is this. No, this design docs are good. My only suggestion would be put them in your code repo so that they are there as a part of the specs. Even if they are PNG files, I think Claude Code is able to read through that file. And so it does help, it does give it the direction that it needs. So I would just put it as a part of your specs so that it can actually see those design docs. And if I look at them, let me take a quick look. We are asking if these are too specific. Uh, 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 Not really. I think they're fine. They're not too specific, and no, I don't think they're too specific. I think they look pretty good. I don't know what you're building, but like from the looks of it, they look like a very high level diagram. Any other questions, folks? Okay. If no questions, folks, join us for our next meetup. Follow us on LinkedIn. We are going to be doing it next Saturday too. This was amazing, folks. You guys were awesome. Thank you for giving us time on a Saturday. A lot of great questions. And thank you so much for all the help. And we are going to see you next week. Thank you. And yes, I will be sharing the recording on Meetup. So on Meetup, I'm going to upload this recording and I'll put it there and people will be able to see it there. Okay, cool. Thanks, folks. Have a good rest of your weekend. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here.